It's 7 o'clock. This is Sky News Breakfast. These are our top stories this morning. Acquitted. Donald Trump found not guilty of incitement to insurrection as his second Senate impeachment trial concludes. Former president says the Make America Great Again movement has only just begun, while President Biden says his thoughts are with those who stood guard at the Capitol. We're live in Washington, D.C. Also this morning, lockdown-sceptic Conservatives call on the Prime Minister to speed up the relaxation of COVID restrictions, as reports suggest picnics in parks could be allowed from the 8th of March. It comes as the vaccine rollout prepares for its next stage, with people aged 65 to 69 and the clinically vulnerable invited to get their jab from tomorrow. Fighting for the forgotten. Sky News speaks to an asylum seeker on hunger strike to protest over the quality of food being provided as they wait to have their claims heard. England cricketers are facing an uphill battle against Indians bowlers at the second test in Chennai. They've already lost informed captain Joe Root.
It's another cold start over eastern parts of the country, but that's not the news today. It's going to be very windy with gusts in excess of 60, even 70 miles per hour. But all of that is bringing milder conditions. All the weather details coming up shortly.
And at 7:45, we'll take a look at the newspapers with the anthropologist Mariana Hotter and Ellie Green from the Policy Exchange. Good morning. Welcome to Sky News Breakfast. Thank you for joining us. Donald Trump has been acquitted in his second Senate impeachment trial, in which he stood accused of incitement to insurrection over last month's Capitol riots. 7 Republicans voted with Democrats, with 57 senators in total voting to impeach and 43 voting to acquit, meaning the vote fell short of the two-thirds majority needed for a conviction. In a statement, Mr. Trump said the Make America Great Again movement is only just beginning, while in the last few hours, President Biden has said his thoughts are with those who stood guard on the 6th of January. Our US correspondent, Cordelia Lynch, reports from Washington.
The respondent, Donald John Trump, former President of the United States, is not guilty as charged in the article of impeachment.
Donald Trump, impeached for inciting an insurrection, now acquitted at the site of the siege, the Senate. The trial revived the human horror of a protest that became a riot.
We fight like hell, and if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
Democrats argued Mr. Trump explicitly directed the mob on January the 6th.
He named the date, he named the time, and he brought them here, and now he must pay the price.
They tried to convey the lasting consequences of that day.
The officers who struggled to recover from the injuries they sustained to protect us. They struggle to recover today.
The defense team, though, won out, claiming the trial was all driven by political vengeance. Mr. Trump's words, simply normal political rhetoric.
Congress has no authority, no right, and no business holding a trial of citizen Trump, let alone a trial to deprive him of fundamental civil rights.
In a lengthy statement, his client delivered a familiar lament and hinted at a comeback. This has been yet another phase of the greatest witch hunt in the history of our country, Mr. Trump said. No president has ever gone through anything like it. In the months ahead, I have much to share with you, and I look forward to continuing our incredible journey together to achieve American greatness for all of our people. But the former president has exposed a deep tension in his party. Listen to the incredible unease of the most senior Republican who voted to acquit.
There's no question, none, that President Trump is practically and morally responsible for provoking the events of the day.
Democrats viewed that excoriating speech rather dimly.
What we saw in that Senate today was a cowardly group of Republicans who apparently have no options because they were afraid to defend their job, respect the institution in which they served.
What everyone must now accept is Donald Trump has a firm grip on his party, And however uncomfortable it may make them feel, they've cleared the path for him to run in 2024. Cordelia Lynch, Sky News, Washington.
Well, Adam Parsons is live in Washington for us this morning. So, Adam, Donald Trump lives to fight another day, but how damaging has the second impeachment trial been to him, if at all?
I don't think it's been particularly damaging for him in any way, because the simple fact is that the people who don't like Donald Trump don't like him probably even more now. And the people who already did like him think that this was a great big witch hunt and that he hadn't done anything wrong. So I think you probably have entrenched positions. Clearly, if he had been convicted and then ultimately barred from office, then that would have been an enormous obstacle in the career of Donald Trump. But he hasn't been. He's been exonerated for the second time. And in the minds, I think, of his supporters and indeed of him, this is another sign that the political establishment is out to get him, and that he can use this for all he's worth as being the sign that he is the guy who stands up to Washington. What it will have damaged is the Republican Party, which now is split clearly into those who support Donald Trump and those who don't. He is an incredibly divisive figure, but it is worth noting in the days before this trial, a poll for The Economist carried out by YouGov showed that 87% of Republican voters had a positive opinion of him. Among everyone else, it is next to zero. So effectively, Republican voters still really like Mr. Trump. Everyone else really doesn't like him. That is no surprise to anyone who's watched American politics over the past few years. And that is why we got that statement from him today. He's the favourite to get the Republican nomination for 2024. And in his mind, woe betide anyone who stands up to him. So he was talking about his beautiful Make America Great Again campaign. We did get a statement from the president, from Joe Biden, who certainly took a much calmer approach. He said much of his focus was on remembering the people who had defended the Capitol on January the 6th, indeed those who had died or been injured. But he did also reflect on the events on the Senate floor. He had this to say: while the final vote did not lead to a conviction, the substance of the charge is not in dispute. Even those opposed to the conviction, like Senate Minority Leader McConnell, believe Donald Trump was guilty of a disgraceful dereliction of duty and practically and morally responsible for provoking the violence unleashed on the Capitol. Interesting that he mentioned Mitch McConnell there. I think Mr. McConnell really does sum up this dichotomy, a man who voted to acquit, but at the same time launched that enormous attack on Mr. Trump. And I think you are seeing here almost a reflection of US society. 57% of Americans said that they thought Donald Trump should be convicted. 57% of senators agreed with them. But that wasn't enough to get the conviction. And Donald Trump doesn't just live to fight another day. I think he's probably emboldened.
Adam, thank you. A group of lockdown-sceptic Conservatives have written to the Prime Minister calling on him to commit to a timetable for lifting COVID restrictions with a complete end to controls by the end of April. It comes as reports in this morning's papers suggest picnics in parks with one other person not in your household could be allowed from the 8th of March. Meanwhile, the next stage of the vaccine rollout begins tomorrow morning. More on that with Milena Vasilinovic in just a moment. But first, let's go to our political correspondent, Rob Powell in Westminster. And Rob, we seem to be moving closer to getting to those very important details about what this roadmap out of lockdown might look like.
Yeah, week tomorrow, Gillian, is when we'll get the details from the Prime Minister. Plenty of speculation going on already, and a group of Conservative MPs, some 60 or so in the COVID recovery group, who throughout the pandemic have really been pressing the case for easing restrictions. Today, writing to the Prime Minister to set out what they think should happen, essentially agreeing that schools should be the first thing to go back on March the 8th, but then saying they want restaurants and pubs open by Easter in a COVID-secure way, and saying they don't see any reason for any restrictions to be in place come May if the government has met its target of vaccinating the top 9 priority groups, all over 50s, by then. That timetable, I think, is ambitious. I think that will be too fast for how rapid the Prime Minister wants to go, albeit I think there was a different tone from Boris Johnson yesterday. Usually questions about easing lockdown is met with a stock reply that it's too early to talk about that. Yesterday, Boris Johnson said that he was optimistic and laid out, in broad brushstrokes anyway, how he would go about lifting the restrictions. No confirmation about when hospitality will reopen, though. No confirmation this morning either about widespread reports in the papers that picnics and outdoor coffees with other people could be allowed from early March alongside the return of schools. I think we can be fairly confident that measures of those sorts, meeting up outside, outdoor socialising, albeit in a limited way, will be some of the first easement measures that the government will look to bring forward. I think that's just based on what happened last time, also what we know about how this virus spreads, but also the fact that actually allowing people to meet up and have coffee and picnics outside with one other person would only be a very, very slight difference from what we have at the moment.
And Milena, the vaccine rollout to enter a new stage this week.
Right, those aged 65 to 69, as well as people who are clinically vulnerable, are being contacted and invited to book their COVID-19 jab. NHS England says that 1.2 million people have already been contacted. In the further next few days, 1.2 million others will be invited to book their appointment. Now, this is NHS England moving down that priority list onto the next group. This is after ministers are feeling rather confident that they will reach everyone in that top 4 groups and vaccinate nearly 15 million people by Monday. There is some concern, however, that the vaccine uptake has been lower in some communities, and NHS England Medical Director Stephen Powers has urged everyone who's been offered a jab to take it because, as he says, this disease is not going away anytime soon.
Coronavirus is certainly going to be with us for some time to come. We already have nearly 20,000 people still in our hospitals suffering the consequences of this virus. So the key thing is in the months to come we get everybody vaccinated who's eligible for the vaccine and we start to protect society against this disease.
Now, some parts of England have already started vaccinating people over 65 after they've already worked through their top 4 priority groups. And in Wales, the First Minister, Mark Drakeford, said that even some people over 50 have been contacted to book their COVID-19 jab after they reached everyone else in those top 4 priority groups. Gillian.
Milena and Rob, thank you both. Let's take a look now at the latest coronavirus figures for the UK. 13,308 new cases of COVID-19 have been recorded in the latest 24-hour period. A further 621 people have died within 28 days of testing positive. That brings the total number of COVID deaths in the UK to 116,908, and 14.56 million first doses of a vaccine have now been administered. Well, later this morning, Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab will be amongst Sophie Ridge's guests on Sophie Ridge on Sunday, as will the First Minister of Wales, Mark Drakeford. That's from 8:30 this morning here on Sky News. Labour is urging Chancellor Rishi Sunak to ease the burden of COVID-related debt on business, warning hundreds of thousands of firms could go to the wall without government support. Shadow Chancellor Annalise Dodds says that from next month, companies are facing the prospect of having to start paying back £71 billion in government-backed loans intended to nurse them through the pandemic. Joining me now is Martin McTague, National Vice Chair of the Federation of Small Businesses. First of all, what's your estimation of government support for business through the pandemic up until this point? Has it been sufficient?
Yeah, I mean, the government support has been very good. I think as an emergency measure, we've seen 1.5 million businesses supported with bounce back loans. But we're now entering a crucial period. In the next 3 months, a lot of government support will end. Certainly at the end of March, we'll be faced with significant corporate failures. Our latest estimate says that it could be as many as 250,000 businesses fail in the next 3 months.
Yes, and as I said in that intro, the Shadow Chancellor Annalise Dodds saying that from next month, companies are facing the prospect of having to start paying back £71 billion. I mean, what are your members saying to you about that prospect, facing that prospect, a very real prospect next month?
Well, many of them are saying it's completely unsustainable, especially those people in certain high pressure sectors like leisure, hospitality and retail. As many as 29% of the people we surveyed said that their repayments were more than their turnover in the current period.
So what are they going to do? What is the advice? What are you saying to them?
Well, we're saying to government that because this is completely unsustainable, we think they have to step in. They have to provide additional support. At the moment, what they're saying is that the debt can be delayed. It can be postponed, in some cases up to 10 years. But what we believe is that all that will do is make the businesses' balance sheets completely unsustainable. They will not be able to invest in their businesses. They will only be able to limp on just about paying the debt that they owe. Now, that means that they can't invest in things like green technology. They can't invest in tech, which everybody has seen over this pandemic has made a massive difference to the way companies perform.
So exactly what are you asking the government to do? Because you're saying that you don't think delayed repayment is the way forward. Specifically, what can they do to help?
There are two things we're asking them to do. One is what we're calling a contingent tax liability. Essentially, it's a bit like a student loan for business. And that will mean that businesses will only pay back as their businesses generate profit. And if after a certain period of time, that business can no longer pay it back, that loan is written off. The other option we're proposing is that the loan can be converted into employee shares. And we believe that will strengthen the balance sheet and improve the productivity and the efficiency of those businesses.
And how confident are you that the government will take these suggestions on board? I mean, what's the dialogue that you've been involved in?
I've got to say it hasn't been very encouraging so far. The government seems to have a view that maybe the market will take care of this. And we believe that the signs are so great that they must step in. I don't think there is a market solution to many of these problems. They really do need to take really important steps now to correct this.
Martin McTague, National Vice Chair of the Federation of Small Business, thank you very much for speaking to us this morning, asking for the government to listen to their requests.
Thank you.
Time now for a look at the weather with Joe.
It's looking a bit different this week, a lot different this week.
Warmer?
It's certainly milder. Yeah, we don't use the word warmer just yet, although by next weekend we'll be dragging some air from the far south, and so we could be seeing daytime temperatures between 14 and 16. Contrast that with this weekend. But let's look at the details for today.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Hello there, good morning to you. Well, we are talking about milder conditions this week, but not necessarily a huge amount of sunshine. It is going to be quite blustery with rain and also some rather strong winds. And the winds are certainly a feature of today's forecast, gusting at times to 60 miles per hour and at times this evening for western parts of Scotland up to 70 miles per hour. So it's still a pretty chilly start, central and eastern parts, sub-zero temperatures, touch of frost, risk of ice as well. A mixture of rain, sleet, snow, freezing rain over Scotland will clear through the morning. There will be a risk of freezing rain from the North Midlands northwards throughout the day, but that risk will diminish slowly from the southwest. So outbreaks of rain across western parts of the UK mainland, more persistent rain over Ireland, and the whole lot is moving its way eastwards through the course of the day. It's going quite slowly, and the mild area is really behind that second area of rain. So as we go through this evening and overnight, we see those strong winds starting to ease into Monday. The rain in the southeast first thing, a rather grey, misty, murky start elsewhere.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Still to come, all the sport with Jackie. Morning, Jackie.
Good morning. If you got up early to watch England's cricketers, you're probably thinking, I wish I hadn't bothered. They are really up against it on day 2 of the second test against India. We've got all the latest from Chennai for you. Plenty of wickets have fallen there. 2 completely different days for the top 2 Brazilian goalkeepers in the Premier League. All smiles for Man City's Ederson, as Liverpool's Alisson was left red-faced. And Johnny May's spectacular try gets England back on track in the Six Nations. And there's a dramatic game between Wales and Scotland. We've got all the action.
It was 10 years ago that I had my diagnosis, and after walking out of the doctor's office, it was a feeling that mixed up of being sad, feeling sorry for myself, being angry at the situation. What do we do now? And happily, we've been led along the way by Parkinson's UK, who have done a great job, not just for me, but for other people who are always awake on their lines to give you any advice, to show you where the best sort of places to meet people that have this disease. And so they've been pretty good. And the president of the charity is none other than Jane Asher, who has been talking about us being tantalizingly close for some time now. And this really does feel like the real thing. In this case, this is a bit like going back to the future, going back all those years to identifying the protein that's so key in this new research, and then using that information to bring us up to date and look beyond how it can be harnessed. The big question, and all the Parkinson's people that will be listening to this right now will want to know when. That's the big thing. And I don't think we know that yet, but we have had false dawns before, but I think this one feels like the real thing, as I say.
We take you to the heart of stories that shape our world. I'm Greg Milam, Sky's US correspondent here in Los Angeles.
Hello, welcome back. Difficult morning for England's cricketers in India, but a very good one for Grigor Dimitrov and Serena Williams at the Australian Open. Let's have a look.
This sports bulletin is brought to you by Vitality, committed to getting 100 million people 20% more active by 2025.
The world is changing, and I'm really afraid that being selfish can be our worst mistake, and I cannot allow that. When you think that you are not able to provide food to your family, I think that's the worst feeling that someone has.
Wolves manager Nuno Espirito Santo, like all of us, has been profoundly affected by the pandemic. He wanted to help and approached the club's foundation with his offer. The result is a £250,000 donation to Feed the Pack, a project aimed at reducing food poverty in a city where 29% of children are living in poverty.
It's a common project now. It's everybody that wants to help, everybody in Wolves. that can give a hand, he will do so. It's just a beginning.
It was great that he decided that he wanted to support a project and support the city ultimately. We initially explored a few ideas about the type of projects that we could work together on, and we kept coming back to the need for supporting people with food at this most difficult time. So in the end, you know, it was so sort of emotive, the whole topic, that, you know, it was the one that we chose out of all the other options.
What do you want to achieve from the project, and what do you think it can achieve?
I think it can involve many people. It can involve everyone, companies, individual, and it can bring a spirit that we need to support each other now as a pack. And when I speak about pack, it's not only our fans, it's the city.
Football has played on through lockdowns, but Nuno and his staff have not been desensitised to society's problems.
Not having fans here, not having that presence, it's a big blow. It's a big blow, but it's not so big as we are experiencing besides football. The society and the world is on problems. We can see, you just turn on the news and you get frightened. So, and with all these doubts in the future of the people, it's a moment that shows that's a light. We're gonna go through this. We just need to stick together, to stay close to each other, to not being selfish. This is not the right moment to think about individuals, to think about as a whole, is to think about which future we want for the further generations in front of us. This pandemic will leave big scars in our lives, and let's try to make it easier for everybody.
Do you think what you're doing now and what the Feed the Pack project will do is give people a sense of community that may not have had it before as well? When people go through abject poverty, they may feel alone.
Exactly that. Let's not allow them to feel alone. Let's give them the sense and the feeling that they have someone, and us as a club, as a foundation, it's the right moment to do it.
It was tough, it was brave, I didn't quite understand at that time what was happening, because, you know, he was kneeling during the national anthem. So part of me, I thought that was disrespectful, but then I looked into the bigger picture of why he was kneeling, you know, for police brutality and inequality, and for someone to put his whole life on the line for the better of the people, like, it's just inspiration at a time when doing that was one of the worst possible times to do it.
When there's significant change, and I feel like that flag represents what it's supposed to represent, and this country is representing people the way that it's supposed to, I'll stand.
He probably had death threats, probably had, you know, his life was probably hell, and for him to do that when it wasn't fashionable to do it, and just do it for the right reasons, I can't have no more respect for him. That wouldn't happen in this country, not a chance. Would I put my whole career on the line for the greater good at that time without having to think about it? Probably not. So for him to do that, it's just inspirational character, really is. Everyone's talking about this, Black Lives Matter and this, that and the other, but people are talking about it now because it's fashionable. Like, to do that, to get on your knee when, and I know there's a couple other players at the time, but for him to do that by himself, like, he's just, I can't put into words the amount of respect I have for him.
And you just said that.
Committed to getting 100 million people 20% more active by 2025.
This is Sky News Breakfast. Coming up, Sky News speaks to an asylum seeker on hunger strike, protesting over the quality of food being provided as they wait to have their claims heard. Welcome back to Sky News Breakfast. A group of asylum seekers in a hotel in Reading are on hunger strike, protesting the quality of the food they're being given. They say the meals in the temporary accommodation are leaving many malnourished, unwell, and while charity workers argue the quality of the food amounts to a hostile environment being created for those seeking refuge in the UK. Adele Robinson reports.
We are on day 9 of the hunger strike. It's too strong.
A day feels like a week here.
We have things going to be social pass.
24-year-old Salah is on hunger strike with other asylum seekers at his hotel in Reading.
Here where I spent my last 3 months.
For others there, it's been over 8 months. They're protesting at what they describe as lengthy asylum claims and poor food.
Many people have lost weight. Some of them had kidney problems. We are reading now, so I went more than 10 times to Royal Berkshire Hospital with many people. All have very bad conditions and have medical problems.
And because of the food?
Because of the food.
These photos were taken by asylum seekers in the south who say the meals they're given at hotels is often unidentifiable, non-nutritious sludge.
Lots of vitamin C for them. You're very welcome.
In West London, a charity says it's trying to plug the gap. This woman didn't want to be identified. She has a 4-year-old daughter.
It's been miserable. She hasn't eaten healthy food for over 5 months. No vegetables, no fresh milk, no cheese, no egg, no fish. Imagine a kid who's growing and needs all this protein and calcium. She doesn't get any of this. For the first time in my whole life, I've had suicidal thoughts. There are so many suicidal people in the same place.
The charity helping her says the Home Office is thought to give £6 a day per person to some companies providing food, but that is subcontracted, sometimes more than once. The accusation is that corners are being cut.
We're talking about the most vulnerable people in our society. They've escaped all kinds of horrific traumas I wouldn't even want to tell you about. And then get here and have some hope that finally, in getting to a safe country, that the asylum that we're said to be offering is genuine and that we are going to take care of people. But actually what we've got is a hostile environment.
The Home Office refused to comment, but one of the companies involved did, saying Clear Springs ensures that where required, 3 meals a day are provided. The food service provided by our suppliers is reviewed on a regular basis to ensure what is provided meets the required standards and that feedback from our asylum seekers is taken into account as part of that review. Salah, however, says they're not being listened to and vows to continue the hunger strike, fighting, he says, for the forgotten. Adele Robinson, Sky News.
Let's take a look at the other stories making the news for you now. This morning, a 3-day lockdown has been imposed in New Zealand's biggest city, Auckland, after 3 new COVID-19 cases were identified. The level 3 restrictions mean everyone must stay at home except for essential shopping and essential work. The rest of New Zealand will also be placed under heightened restrictions, although will not go into lockdown, Ms Ardern said. The government has announced it will extend a ban on bailiff-enforced evictions in England until the end of March. But it's been warned the policy is only storing up future problems, as homeless charities say hundreds of thousands have fallen behind on their rent or have been served with an eviction notice in the last month alone. Thousands of demonstrators have taken to the streets once again in Myanmar on the 9th straight day of protests against the military coup in the country. Protesters walked through parts of Yangon, calling on the release of the country's former leader, Aung San Suu Kyi, despite laws protecting freedoms being rolled back in recent days. Now, after a year in which independent venues up and down the country have struggled, a campaign is being launched to highlight how music venues are more than just a place where bands perform. Today, on Valentine's Day, the Music Venue Trust, which represents hundreds of grassroots music venues in the UK, wants to hear your venue love stories. Joining me now from Glasgow is singer Kerry Watt and tour manager Dave Rice, a couple who fell in love during a tour in Oxford 6 years ago. Welcome to you. Oh, how romantic. Please, before we go anywhere, tell us your venue love story.
Oh, well, we met on the first day of a tour. The venue was the Oxford O2 Academy. Yeah, and I knocked on the door, and the first person to open the door was Dave. And we spent the next 2 weeks on this tour getting to know each other, and then fell in love. Here we are 6 years later planning our wedding.
Still going. Yeah.
Oh, wow, congratulations. So was it love at first sight with that knock on the door?
We were friends. Like, we got to know each other as friends throughout that whole tour. We were both recently out of relationships. Neither of us were looking for anything. And I think that was what was so great. We got to know each other through like our love of music.
Yeah.
And then within a month or two, that was it.
And Dave, is it commonplace for people to find love at music venues?
Yeah, I think it's very, like, the work is it's very sort of isolated, but you're with a very like connected group of people that you're with all the time. So it's very easy to form strong bonds within the music industry itself, and also going to gigs.
Yeah, and not just romantic ones, but friendships. And I mean, we've met some of our best friends on tours and at shows, people that work behind the scenes as well as the artists and the bands.
And remind us of your roles, because Kerry, you're a singer, and Dave, your role, your job in the music industry.
I am a touring merchandise manager, so I look after the T-shirt sales and all that, but I also tour manage Kerry and look after her when she's on the road.
And so you're now asking for people to come forward with their venue love stories, because you've identified this as a phenomenon, haven't you?
Yeah, we've kind of worked on and off with the Music Venue Trust for the past year, helping promote the venues that we care so much about and that gave us careers. And we feel that support for these grassroots venues particularly is so important to, not obviously the people that work in them and people like us that are passing through and playing these shows, but the fans who a music venue for them is a safe space to escape. It's their social life. It's where they make friends, meet their idols, discover their favourite band. And picturing a world without live music, particularly in Britain, where the culture and the history of live music is so important, is a future that we can't really imagine. So supporting the Music Venues Trust and encouraging people today to share their venue Valentine love stories is something we're passionate about.
So you've got the hashtag Venue Valentine, and what exactly do you want people to get in touch with? What details should they pass on?
So if you've met a partner, a best friend, a group of people that you really connected with at a venue, you got to share a photo of you with that person or those people with the hashtag Venue Valentine. And that will drive a lot of kind of support to the Music Venue Trust and just make people more aware of how they can get involved, how they can help. And the best thing you can really do is just kind of check that out and keep up to date with all the really smart initiatives that they've got coming up over the next few months. They're always collaborating with artists and putting on live stream shows, and there's loads to get involved with.
Dave, what did you do for Valentine's Day today, may I ask?
Well,
it is 7:30 in the morning, so
that's no excuse. You're up. Making excuses for him, Kerry.
Just in the other room, ready for her.
Yeah.
And she's ready for it, yeah.
Thank you both. Enjoy the rest of Valentine's Day. Enjoy. Good to speak to you this morning. It is the time for the weather now. Jo.
I just slipped in.
Yes,
I was riveted by that.
You were reading your Valentine's cards, weren't you?
I was. Not romantic me. Anyway, the weather. Let's get to the scientific bit. It's changing, much milder conditions for the coming week. And by next weekend, we could well be seeing temperatures up to around 14 or 16 degrees Celsius. Not quite the situation this morning, but let's take a look.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Hello there, good morning to you. Yes, much milder conditions coming in from the west. We're going to have a bit of a bumpy ride as this milder air does arrive. It's going to be wet and it's going to be windy. And right at the moment, because we still do have some cold air around, we'll see some sleet, a bit of snow, also freezing rain. And that freezing rain could be anywhere from North Midlands northwards, although the risk will reduce from the southwest during the course of the day. But yes, it's cold for central and eastern areas. Temperatures sub-zero once again, risk of ice and bitterly cold because we've still got these strong blustery winds. And the winds are going to be strongest through the Irish Sea, gusting up to around 60 miles per hour. And for a time this evening, up to around 70 miles per hour for western parts of Scotland. So we've got rain making its way eastwards, outbreaks of showery rain through western parts of the UK mainland. All of that moving through the course of the day. The milder conditions coming in behind. Temperatures this morning already 11, likely to rise to 12 or 13 degrees Celsius. That's 55 degrees Fahrenheit, and we keep those temperatures through the week.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Still to come on Sky News Breakfast. After the break, a look at today's newspapers with anthropologist Mariana Hotta and Ellie Green from the Policy Exchange. Do stay with us.
For the early risers.
We examine the story beyond the headline.
For the knowledge seekers.
Welcome to Divided States.
For the straight talkers, the curious, and the ones who want to be entertained.
Backstage, Sky News' entertainment podcast.
For wherever you are.
Welcome to Sophie Ridge on Sunday podcast.
For the ones who want to know more.
Welcome to the All Out Politics podcast.
For the listeners.
From Sky News Storycast.
Sky News Podcasts. Listen and subscribe for free.
I'm a little bit chaotic sometimes and things can go flying and I mess up. And I saw TikTok as a whole new platform where I don't know any of these people. And I thought it was a really nice way to get a message across, to educate people and just to show that, I want to teach people in a time that I can't do anything at this point. The only thing that I can do is cook and hopefully show people how to cook better at home as well. And that's something that I think I've managed to achieve. I definitely want to break down those kind of barriers of fine dining being a little bit scary. And some of the techniques that I've learned and some of the things that I've trained for over my time in kitchens, it's been great to translate that into videos where people can be like, oh, I didn't know you could use that to make these incredible meals that people are making at home. And it's really great to see other people and my followers actually making the stuff that I'm doing. When we went into lockdown in November, I did a series of 25 days of potatoes. And that is kind of what caught people's eye because I could see that the audience wanted potatoes because I did one video. So one of my favorite ones is the Pomme Anna, which is, I think just came up on the screen actually before, where you kind of layer these gorgeous slices of potatoes and loads of butter. So that's one of my favorite recipes. And again, people get to do it at home and then show me as well, which is incredible. For this book, I've really reflected what I've already done on TikTok and I'm showing people the food that they need. And that's the title of the book. So it's just helping people learn better skills in the kitchen. Whether or not I go back into a kitchen, I'm not sure. I am really enjoying what I'm doing and being able to teach people on a massive scale.
Welcome back. With us again to take us through the newspapers this morning, anthropologists Mariana Hotter and Ellie Green from the Policy Exchange. There they both are. Welcome back. Starting with you, first of all, Ellie, in The Times, and this story about vaccine trials, but this time for children.
Yes, this is quite exciting. So children as young as 5 are set to enter this trial, which could begin in a matter of days. And hopefully this could pave the way for childhood immunisation, a childhood immunisation programme that would, I guess, be in line with similar programmes that we have for measles and for polio. I mean, this piece is also noting that today will likely be the day that the government reaches its target of 15 million vaccinated. That's the over 70s and healthcare workers. And they'll now be able to move on to those who are over 65. So obviously the vaccine rollout being very important. But yeah, this new trial looks to be very promising. And it's exciting news to see that if children can be vaccinated early on and that they will then hopefully have immunity and they'll not have COVID as severely. There's talk that they may have to have a booster later on at some point. But this is definitely exciting news and obviously would then importantly mean the children could get back to school if this vaccine was to prove successful and the schools would no longer be these hotspots for outbreaks.
Any mention of vaccinating teachers?
Not in this piece, but I think obviously that is of critical importance, and I know the government have, spoken about that, and hopefully we'll see that starts to become a priority as we move over the next couple of months, and we start to to try and get children back into school, because obviously this is going to be very important.
Yeah, Marianne, moving away from the pandemic for a moment, The Observer, their article looking at Trump's supporters and the fact that they're still supporting him.
Yeah, that's right. So Trump was acquitted in his impeachment trial yesterday. These senators voted 57 to 43. So there was an overall majority, but in order for the ex-president to have been impeached, they needed to reach a 2/3 majority, which obviously they didn't. So 7 Republican senators did vote with the Democrats to impeach Trump, but obviously that isn't that many. And this article is exploring the kind of wider landscape of Republican support and particularly Trump support in the US, basically saying that your grassroots supporters of Trump are still absolutely committed to Trump and what he represents and his kind of agenda. When pro-Trump or traditionally pro-Trump news channels in the US were showing the details of the impeachment trial, no one watched, because basically human psychology is that if you hold on to a belief, almost like a kind of semi-religious belief, you just deny the evidence that kind of suggests anything otherwise. Some of the Republican senators who voted to acquit Trump didn't do that on the basis that they said that Trump didn't incite the rioters to march on the Capitol building. They just said that there's no jurisdiction for this court because he's not the president anymore, so you can't impeach him. So this is a kind of a fake trial, a phony trial, or a false trial at least. But I think basically the kind of question is now, what does Trump do? If he had been impeached, then he wouldn't have been able to run for election again. Because he's been acquitted, he in principle could stand as the next Republican candidate and stand as the next American president. But I wonder whether it'll be more likely that he will sort of see his role as kingmaker. He's got money, he's got grassroots support, he tears up a rule book and doesn't really care what kind of dirty or otherwise tricks.
Well, he's basically said, watch this space and make America great again hasn't gone anywhere, and there's more to come. Ellie, take us to the Mail and some worrying claims by airport chiefs about the future quarantine hotel process. There seem to be issues.
Yeah, I mean, so from tomorrow, travellers will be forced to quarantine in these hotel quarantine and in hotel quarantines. And Heathrow, where vast numbers of travellers are expected to arrive, has said that there are significant gaps when it comes to how they're going to be able to roll out this programme. There's issues around, obviously, people queuing and whether or not there'll be transmission of COVID in that capacity. There's also been questions around whether or not, if people refuse to fill out the passenger locator form or if they refuse to go into quarantine, what the steps will be. And apparently, they need more advice on that from the government. The government have said that they're in, continued talks with airports about how to roll out this hotel quarantine effectively. I mean, I think obviously there'll be a series of issues that will probably develop over the next couple of days and weeks as this program is rolled out, and there'll be a lot of unforeseen issues that come from obviously quarantining such vast numbers of people and travellers that are coming into this country.
Yeah, very, very worrying, though, very close to it being rolled out with such grave issues. Marianne, why should swimming pools open before pubs? This is in the Times. Who's saying they should?
Perhaps unsurprisingly, the chief executive of Swim England is saying that they should. But Jane Nickerson possibly has a point. A lot on the front pages, we're all getting excited about possibly non-essential shops opening, maybe being able to go and sit in a pub garden on the Easter weekend. But she's saying, hang on a minute, swimming is something that 4 million people do, at least, or used to, adults, did at least twice a month. And the challenge is that you can't translate swimming into a non-swimming pool or pool-based activity. You kind of need the water unless you want to go swimming in your local river in February. And so she's saying, this is actually something that if it's a well-maintained pool, if it's properly chlorinated, even the World Health Organization say it's safe. So we need to prioritise other sports other than the ones where you go for a walk around your local park, even though that is healthy and good. But not everybody can walk, not everybody can use a bicycle. And so swimming does need to be up there on the priority list because it's a matter of physical and mental health. And the healthier the nation, the better able we are to cope with COVID.
I suppose people will be calling for gyms to open as well because health is such an important feature. Ellie, just quickly, time to tell us about this story on universities facing fines. For what?
Yeah, so
in the Telegraph,
universities will be facing fines if they've been found to stifle free speech. I mean, I think this is very welcome news. This is something that Policy Exchange has worked on extensively, both with our History Matters project and also in our previous reports looking at academic freedom in the UK. Ultimately, I think for most people, they see universities as bastions of free speech and places which actively encourage intellectual debate. And so I think that, the news that the government is going to really be proactive in trying to ensure that free speech is able to thrive on campus and also that academic freedom is not threatened, I think will be really, really good news.
We've just got time for this. Well, it's more or less a picture story. I find it just incredible. A woman pushing a milk lorry uphill. Marianne, you picked this out. Did she really do this?
This is insane. So we're not talking, like a milk float. We're talking about an articulated lorry up a hill in Fife. It's a lady called Charlene Leslie. She saw this truck getting stuck in the snowy conditions last week and basically said to a neighbour, "Oh, watch the kids and the dog. They're in the car. I'm going to push this truck up a hill." Obviously, totally dangerous. Absolutely bonkers. Please, no one ever do that again. But it does mean that the company said, "Thanks, Charlene, please don't do that again, but we'll reward you with a free supply of milk for the year."
Yeah. Is it worth it? Free milk for a year? I don't know. Thank you both for taking us through the papers. Good to see you. Much more at the top of the hour.